Welcome back, everyone, to our opening ideas series. And today we're going to be looking at the world of Sicilian. In particular, we're going to see how to punish the Sicilian with the Rossolimo attack, which is bishop b5. Okay, so after e4, c5, knight f3, we are asking for the center. They said no. And instead of playing the open Sicilian with d4, we're going to challenge their knight, which we can either gobble up. But today I'm going to show you different ways that we can play without taking that knight and play for the attack instead. So when I say we're going to punish the Sicilian and destroy it, what I actually mean is that we're going to pose them very serious problems, and they have to be very careful not to get a lost position right away. So we're going to be looking at e6, how to play against the e6 line. Then I want to show you e5 as well. And finally, we'll finish off with G6, which is perhaps the main line of the whole Rossolimo, and how to play against the fianchetto bishop. All right, so let's get started with E5 first. This one is really fun, so I want to give you a little taste for how this could look like. We're going to start by castling, and after bishop d6, which is the modern way to play this e5 line, right? The whole idea for black is to put a knight over here, castle the king kingside, play d6, or sometimes even d5, but d6 is more common. And then later they can also look into a6, b5, bishop b7, and fire with those bishops. As the center starts to come open, those bishops can really hurt us, so you have to be really careful. Now, I will tell you that I think d4 is a really good way to fight for the advantage. And the whole idea here is, let's say they take with the pawn, we have c3. Okay. And if they take with the other pawn, well, again, c3. And I think somewhere there was also bishop c4, which is super annoying for them to face. I think knight takes d4, we have bishop c4. That was the point. And this is a great way to play. But if you want something more adventurous, and if you like the Evans Gambit when you play e4, e5, then I will recommend this move b4. This is very adventurous indeed, especially if you want to attack, because it gives black some concrete problems, right? It's not easy for them to play against it. Like, what did they do about this pawn? I'm challenging their center, and I want to play for c3, d4, just like in the Evans Gambit, right? So if they take with the knight, we can first kick them away with c3, and then we go for d4 right away. All right, so the point is that after the center clears up, we can play bishop b2, and their bishop is really awkward, that pawn is isolated, and even though I'm down a pawn, they have very concrete problems, like just to give you a taste, yeah? We're attacking that bishop already, and if they take, that's losing, as far as I can tell, right? Because we're already coming into g7. Okay, now, what if they take with the pawn? I actually had a game here that maybe I'll get to show you later against my friend, International Master Mark Plotkin, where we went for a3, they take, and then d4. We're giving up all the pawns today. We don't care. Okay. And when they take this pawn, because what else are they gonna do? I'm attacking this after all, right? It's combining the Benko Gambit and the Evans Gambit, okay? Because we're gonna get counterplay on the A and B files, and we have the center like in the Evans Gambit too. So after they take, we have c3. We want our center back, and we don't mind how many pawns we have to give up in the meantime. Okay, we're gonna get some of those pawns back as well, and their center is crumbling. In case you're wondering, how sound is all this? Like, what does the computer think? The computer thinks this is good for white, or at least equal for white. And if the computer thinks you can be down so many pawns and still be equal, I'm a huge fan of the position already. Right? So after they play 97, we take castle and take back on a3. So a6 is very typical. They want to clarify the situation and try to develop, right? But the hard thing for them is they can't develop. I'm not letting them. In my game against Mark, I went for bishop d3 and tried to go for e5 and the attack here, which was interesting, but not the best plan because black gets to retreat the pieces, play d6, and develop. Now, a better way to play is knight c2, just keeping the pin on that rook. And the point is, let's say they bring back the bishop, trying to develop. We go for d5, and then if we're lucky, d6, and now we're just winning a piece for no reason. Okay, and it's really hard for them to do anything. I think knight g6 was the best they have here. So after bishop c4, we keep the bishop on the scary diagonal. e5 is still in the air. e5, d5, right? And they have to find the square for this bishop, and then we just go to the other diagonal. So just like in the Evans, we have the fiery bishops firing away. If they play d6, we have e5 going for the diagonal pin. And if they play rook e8, then I think we can just kick out the bishop, where normal moves are already losing. That's how scary the position is. They can't play a normal move right now. They have to play something extreme, like giving up the bishop with d6 perhaps. If they play a normal move like bishop c7, which your opponents in blitz will definitely do, right? Then this is already a crushing advantage because they don't have control of the center. We have queen b3 coming, and there is no good way for them to defend. For example, if they take my pawn, I simply play queen b3 and say thank you, because there's no way you're going to defend everything here. We have knight g5 coming as well. So this is just a crushing miniature from white. Now, yes, they can sacrifice the bishop, but even there, we're supposed to be slightly better after bishop a3. So that brings us to what else can they do? If they don't want the pawn that I'm going to take, play bishop b2 and go for c3 and d4, just like before, right? And in this case, I'm going to have the a file, which we don't always have in the wing gambits, you know? Like sometimes there are these approaches with a3, b4, c3, d3, and they just play b6 or d6 and just ignore us. But here they took the pawn, which means that we're happy to take back on a4 and get that a file. Okay, so that brings us to the next line. Let's take a look at the e6 Sicilian. So there are many ways to play against 97. One way is to simply capture the knight. And of course, this is its own can of worms that we can talk about. There's b3, d3, and there's an interesting move here, which is e5, also a good idea. If they play d5, it's a bad pawn structure, and if they take, then the point is I can actually get away with taking, because if they try to trap my knight and rook, there's this queen trap after knight c3, and suddenly this queen is not getting out of here, and we're coming for her soon. Okay, so that's one way to play it, but not everybody likes giving up the bishop pair. It may be good, but not for everyone. If you like attacking play, and if you want to go something more open Sicilian-y, then I would suggest you try d4. Okay, so the story behind this whole idea is that Giri tried this against Carlsen in 2021. And I was looking at that game, which went along the lines of queen b6. This used to be considered the refutation to all this, because if white has to take, black takes back almost in any way. Probably this is the best way, and black is totally fine here. They can go for knight g6, bishop e7, and castle. So this position is very innocent and harmless. Instead, our idea is to sacrifice a piece with bishop e3, and that's exactly what Giri did here. Now, I was trying to figure out what was his idea after knight takes. So their game went knight takes, Carlsen took, and Giri said, "Okay, I'm up a piece, or I'm down a piece, but how are you defending the piece?" And Carlsen shocked him with the crazy knight takes b5, giving up the queen for 3 pieces. So the first thing we have to know is that this is not scary at all. We can just play queen d3, and when the knight has to retreat, we have queen g3, keeping an eye on that guy and this guy at the same time. And here Carlsen would have been in big trouble, because this position is already like an extra pawn for white, at least. Okay, so that's what should have happened. Instead, Giri was too timid. He played some knight d2, tried to develop his pieces, and in the end managed to lose in this weird position where we have a queen against 3 minor pieces. Okay, so now we know that taking that bishop is not good for black. What are they supposed to do? Well, they can try to hold on to the piece. How? Let's say they play e5. Okay, that seems to be one approach. I actually had a game here against Grandmaster Vladimir Baklan, and he played knight c6, which was also interesting. But against e5, this one is more critical. Yeah, we play c3 and ask them where is their knight going. The funny part is we're really sacrificing a piece, and they can hold on to the piece. We're not faking the sacrifice because here we have to give away this bishop, right? And we're gonna give it away in this way. So after pawn takes, they have an extra piece, but we don't mind because after the knight comes to c3, we're eyeing this gorgeous square. If the knight ever goes away, I'm going for that square. And how are they developing? How are they castling is a very good question that I don't have an answer to. All right. So then they can try taking over here, but in this line, after bishop takes, the queen is hurt, and this pawn is also ours. So the queen has to retreat. And then we could take, but I would suggest rook e1. And we're going for the very simple knight d5, very direct. After the knight comes here, bishop b6 is in the air with knight c7 coming. The fork is deadly. And if they move that knight away, then we always have compensation. Let's say they play knight c6, right? Then we can stick the knight on d5, and we have huge compensation because bishop b6 is still in the air. And if they take, the queen is coming here, right? Rook c1 is in the air. They can't develop. They can't move that bishop, sadly. And because of one knight dominating their whole army, white is better. Okay, so that brings us to other moves. What else can they do? Well, they can try to kick away this knight and hold on to the pawn. But then knight d5, and I have bishop b6 again. If they take, I really don't recommend that position for black. That looks god awful, right? Just d6 coming, g7's dropping, everything's bad. And if they play super precisely, if they're super smart, they play rook a6, and somehow this is supposed to be close to equality with rook g6, but I don't see many people enjoying this, right? They managed to cover the b6 square, but their pieces are super weird. This is very computer artificial chess, and after bishop b6, they're lucky they're not getting mated right away. And even here, I still like the position for white. Okay, so what else do they have? They can try to take on a4, saying that the queen will stay here, or at least that they will steal the pawn. But then we have a bunch of pleasant options. I'm going to recommend d5. You can even take, nothing wrong with that. And all these options are very pleasant for us. So if they run away, then we can take back our pawn here, and we may be down a piece, but again, super pleasant because they can't develop properly. Like I said, d5 to me seems even more promising because we have d6 ideas. After d6, knight c6, knight comes here, and this is already pretty much unstoppable. Okay, this is already losing for black. Okay, if they're very smart cookies, they will find this move queen b4, and this is the only way to keep the game going, I should say. And after d6, knight c6, knight d5, they have to take that pawn, and they're lucky that this is only a perpetual check because it looks like I'm winning a rook, but they still have a rook a6, and here I have to take the draw. Sadly, it's only a draw with knight c7. I can't really take that rook because the endgames are gonna be bad for me, right? So I may as well take it, but that's if they're very smart. This is the only downside to d5. If you don't want to draw, you can take on e5 and play for the win. It's heavy positional compensation here, right? Because their pieces are all stuck. d5, d6 squares are weak. My pawns are super annoying for them, and even that bishop has a hard time coming. Okay? So that's the piece sacrifice. Can they do anything to avoid it? Yeah, I would suggest if you're playing this for black, just play a normal move like knight g6 and play it like an open Sicilian. Because after queen b6, I think this idea is just very strong. I'll show you my game against Vladimir. So we got this position. I agreed to the sacrifice. I kept the bishop here, and I'm saying I want to get the bishop here and kick away their queen, right? They try to hold on to the knight, but that lets me win a piece back. So now we get the piece back with interest because we're hitting their queen. They can't develop properly. And c5, I mean, I should just go back, which is what happened. And here, my only mistake was rook e1, when knight d2 would be even more promising, right? Because knight c4 is coming, knight a5 is in the air, a5, a6, or knight c4, e5, and knight d6 getting the dark squares. The queen can come to g4 and wreak a lot of havoc in their position. If they try to castle, which is maybe the best they have, then they have knight c4, knight e5, and ask, like in many openings, how are you defending f7, right? It reminds me of some Scandinavian positions as well. Okay, so this is just great for white here. Now that we know this idea, let's go on to the g6 gambits. So what if our opponents play g6? Here I want to show you something completely different. We're not giving up a piece yet, don't worry, but we are gambiting. So the point here is first we castle, and after they play bishop g7, c3, this is one of the main lines, and we're happy to gambit the pawn, okay? Because some people play rook e1, queen e2 is a move, and they try to prepare it. I'm just gonna tell you, sack the pawn. And modern engines, so neural engines like Leela, right? They like this sort of idea where you give up the pawn on e4. They try giving up the pawn in almost every position possible in every e4 opening, especially in the Rossolimo, because anytime they take that pawn, we have compensation on the e file, we get the center with d5, and their pieces are not ready really to defend after taking here. So it gives us a big initiative. It's not winning perhaps, but they have to be very precise not to lose on the spot. Okay, so just to show you, what are they supposed to do? Okay, what they're supposed to do is take the pawn right away. That's probably more promising than taking first, because a lot of people take first and then they get this position, which may be even worse. Okay, so after d5, we gave up a pawn, but how are they defending? Right? Like 95 is already dubious, right? Because too many pieces on one line. So they should play 96, which is not an easy move to pull off. And then after 93, this is our novelty for today. A lot of good players tried bishop a4, bishop d3. I think knight a3 is the most promising. So just to give you an idea of how deadly this can be, let's say they take the bishop, right? Then we take back, they go here, and d6. Okay, we're just close to winning on the spot because we got the d6 square. So their bishop is dead, knight c7 is coming, and if they castle, we can take bishop h6 would be the simplest way, right? If they play rook e8, I can trap that rook, or take something or other. Okay, I can also play bishop g5 here. Everything is good because their bishop is miserable. They didn't develop properly. Okay, that's if they just play normal moves and capture my bishop. And one more showcase slide is, of course, if they play knight a5, this is not going to end well for them. So I can simply play bishop f4 and give up the pawn on b2. Right? I'm okay with this turn of events because if they do take that pawn, I can take on d6, I can take their knight, and here I attack the rook if they try to go for more. Okay, so if they castle, I simply bring back the bishop, and we're doing great. Two minor pieces for a rook. And the dark squares, don't forget. Okay, so if they play knight a5, I also have a knight trap. Okay, this knight does not belong here. Even if they take, I'm gonna eat the knight soon. And once again, we're very happy. Okay. What else can they do? Well, like I told you, they probably should take right away. This seems to be more reasonable. And after d5, knight d6. Again, knight e5 is asking for trouble. So knight d6 is better. And then after bishop d3, we hold on to this bishop. Their knight has to run away. They can try knight a5. If knight e5, then we always have this idea of bishop h6, right? And after knight a5, we can play for bishop f4. And our idea here is we're going to take that knight. Okay, we take and we ruin the structure completely, burying the bishop at home, right? because our next move after we defend this pawn is c4. And that bishop will never see the light of day. Neither will the knight. Check out this guy. He's having a hard time as well. He's not coming out today. And while they're on vacation on the queen side, I'm happy to start my h4, h5s, knight g5 ideas, breaking through their light squares. Okay, this bishop cannot hurt me by himself, and half of the board is cut out of play. So even here, the computer says it's close to equal, but I look at it, I say, great, I really want this in my game. Okay, because this looks very fun to play. Okay, so that brings us to the main line. So knight d6 and knight a3. That's the novelty I want to show you guys today. Morozevich had a game in this sort of position, and he did manage to get an advantage there. But I want to show you my analysis. So after knight e5 takes, rook e1, and we get more pressure on the king. Bishop runs away. If they go bishop g7, we have bishop g5. If they play bishop f6, then we go for bishop a6, right? So they're having a hard time no matter what, okay? I think knight f5 gets punished here. We can play simply queen d2. And let's say they take off my bishop here. I take back with the queen. They still can't castle. A6. It looks like they're kicking us back. Then we have to retreat, right? They develop and everything is fine. Nope. We're not retreating today. We have such a big lead in development. All our pieces are coming out that we can just keep advancing, keep going forward. So I'll give this to you as a puzzle. See if you can try to guess the next white move. All right. White to play and punish black for their opening insolence. Three, two, one. Good job if you found rook c1, just giving them the whole house. If they want the pawn, they can have the pawn, but it won't do them any good after I checkmate them, right? Just to give you an example. Oopsie, right? And they can get the bishop, but it doesn't matter either because after they get my bishop, the knight comes over, and there is no good way to stop knight c7. So that bishop is poisoned. So they can try to defend with e6. This may be their best try. But now the attack keeps going. It's already too late for them. So takes, kaboom. We take with the rook. Okay. They run for their life, and we just remove that bishop. Get rid of him and keep attacking. So the one game here went along the lines of d5 and I think bishop f1 was played, which I really don't understand. Okay, yeah, it was bishop f1 here, and he lost against Shirov. It was Hansen against Shirov. Shirov managed to survive, but if only Hansen found rook f3, it would be a different story. So to show you what could have happened, bishop f5, we keep the pin going. We safeguard our bishop, and g4 is in the air. Whatever they do, g4. Too many things on one line, right? They take that pawn, just sidestep everything. All right, we defend the rook, make sure there is no queen trade. That's what I'm actually scared of. And after the queen runs back, take with the bishop and win their queen. Everything else, I'm just going to take that bishop and mate them. So there is no way out for black. So I hope you guys enjoy this Rossolimo adventure, right? Where we have all these exciting ideas made by the newest engines, right? Because 20 years ago, nobody was giving up pawns on e4, at least not in such fashion, right? But modern computers, they don't mind giving away the piece, like in the e6 Rossolimo we saw. They don't mind giving up the pawn because they see the positional compensation for white. So I hope you can use these ideas in your games. Good luck.